Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Book of Nook Show. My name is Kyle Colley and this is a special episode of Founders Talk Podcast, a podcast for founders to tell their stories, ideas, and visions of the future. This episode is brought to you by Bookem, the book community's new and best way to host dynamic online book clubs. Download the app and start your book club today at www.bookemapp.com. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. My guest today is the spectacular Tanya Sam. Tanya is the creator of the esteemed It's Tanya Time book club. She's also the co-founder of Elizabeth and Minnie's publishing company, a new company. Tanya is passionate about helping women and minorities pursue opportunities in business and tech. She is a founder of the Ambition Fund, has hosted business accelerators, and she's a tech-savvy investor. She was also a cast member of The Real Housewives of Atlanta. She is a fashionista. She is a reader, a publisher, an intellect, a tech girl, a traveler, a runner, a TV personality, a businesswoman, and she loves riding horses. Tanya, welcome to the Founders Talk Podcast.
Kyle, that was such a great introduction. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. You do all the things. So like if I miss anything, let me know.
No, I feel like that about sums it up, but I love to hear it.
Yeah, perfect. I would love to talk to you a little bit about like growing up. Like what roles did books play in your life and what were some like particular stories or books that sparked your love of reading?
Oh my gosh. It's really funny because I have always been, I hear all those things and it sounds so fabulous, but feel like at its core, I've always been a nerdy book geek at heart. I was the girl that would be like, "Hey, are you coming over for a play date?" Invite my friends over and I'd be like, "Let's play reading. Let's play school." Or I'd bring my books with me. So books have always been, literally some of my best friends. I grew up in Toronto, Canada, and a lot of the books I grew up reading were like and very obsessed with were Nancy Drew, English authors like Enid Blyton and the Fabulous Four, Little Mysteries. I also really got into Sweet Valley High and the Babysitters Club. I think I had every single Babysitters Club edition. So I don't know if some of y'all remember that or not, but and then because of the Babysitters Club, I remember starting my own, probably that was my first business, my own little Babysitters Club. And we had little Babysitter Club kits and we had parents call in and book us for babysitting, which is pretty wild right now because I think we were 13 years old. But I've always loved books. And then as I grew up and older, I started reading everything from Judy Blume and onwards. So definitely a central point in my life.
I love to hear that, and I travel to Toronto like every now and then, so I'm a big fan of it. Were there any like moments that have shaped your life outside of books or anything, being like
Yeah.
up in Canada?
For sure. My dad is from Ghana, West Africa. My mom is from England. And so, I think about that mixed cultural and ethnic upbringing. And it's funny now as I look back, I'm trying to think about some of the books that I read that really featured, women of color, Black people, African people. And it was really hard to find back in Toronto. And so I think that's really been inspirational for me as I have launched our publishing company, as we have book club, trying to really feature authors of color, voices of color, stories from, the African diaspora, the Latin community, and beyond. Also, I experienced grief at a very young age. My mom passed when I was 12 years old. And so losing a parent that young, I remember trying to look for books or things to help me navigate my grief. And there wasn't a lot of that as well at the time because, childhood grief was not necessarily taboo, but we like to say in the grief community, it's very swept under the rug. So I also am involved in a lot of grief work for kids as well. And there's a lot of books that come out of that are child appropriate, helping them through grief as well. So I think books are just such a beautiful part to help us through so many parts of life.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to have like books as companions to experience
Yeah,
those stories because I think books do that for us, right? Like you get to
absolutely.
live a million different lives through books, and seeing that has to have really shaped your life in that space for real.
Oh, Kyle, I love how you said it. You get to live a million different lives through books, walk in a million different types of shoes. And it really allows us to go not just like all over the world, but to different galaxies, different worlds. Like that's my favorite part. We're not just sitting, I'm in Atlanta right now, but you can literally travel to like an alternate galaxy where they speak different languages, they look different than us and understand different ways of life. It's such an incredible journey and way to travel.
Yeah. So being like a founder and having like these, multi-talented things that you are a part of, how do you manage like all your different passions and skills while also running businesses and everything else that you have on going on in your world?
Mm. I mean, managing and balancing are two very different things. I, tell myself that, for anyone out there who's a founder, entrepreneur, who's a very multifaceted, multi-hyphenate person, it's about balance, but also giving yourself grace to know that you can't do it all at once. You just, align yourself with what needs to get done, what will balance that with happiness and joy, productivity and progress, and just keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's good. And so, speaking of your book club, like, what inspired you to create your book club, and how has it evolved from its inception?
So I have always had a book club, trying to surround myself around community and people who want to read has always been something very central to my life, even, when I was in high school, when I was going through college. And as I started moving around for different work occupations or jobs to different cities, I would use it as a tool to meet people. So when I moved to New York, I knew nobody. And, I'd bump into people and be like, hey, do you have a book club? Can I join it? I'm starting a book club. So it's interesting now as, as I fast forward, I'm actually have created this community around it. But I think it's really about forging friendships and using fiction or nonfiction as a way to sort of stimulate conversation and connection.
Yeah, we talk a lot about community on our Creators Talk podcast, but I'm
Mhm.
curious, how do you how do you define community, and how do you also think about fostering community?
So, I mean, community as a definition, it is sort of what you want it to be. For me, I feel like it allows us, whether it's in a virtual community or an actual physical community, and we are sort of going back and forth between both right now, I think, post COVID, but just allowing people to connect. And for us, I think books allow us to sort of forge friendships, conversation, explore different narratives. And share experiences. And sometimes it's wrapped in the guise of fiction or a book. So you're not actually, presenting yourself and your real life experiences to a community, but you can sort of do it through a veil that for in our communities as well, for our book club is safe, it's fostering, it's nurturing, but you also sort of have this self-identification, or you're able to just learn about other people and cultures. But I really think it comes down to connection and being able to share thoughts, ideas, reciprocate them, and grow from that conversation.
As well said. And how do you think about selecting books? Because I know there's so many books you can choose from. Like, what types of stories resonate most with your club?
Oh, well, this is a great thing. One of the things that I will sort of pat myself on the back for is I feel like I have successfully, when I started the Tanya Time Book Club, let me back up. I started the Tanya Time Book Club in particular. I've always said I've had book clubs. And I would say pre-pandemic, when I got to Atlanta, I wanted to, build community. So I started doing book clubs in my home. And I had a couple very famous authors that lived in my neighborhood. So I started begging them to come to the book club meetings. And they'd be like, okay. So we'd have these fabulous dinners and author dinners, as we would call them. And we'd have everybody who had read the book would come and we'd get to sit around with these authors. And it was incredible. And then the pandemic hit. And, I'd been on Real Housewives of Atlanta. So I had this following. We're all stuck inside the house. So I said, who wants to read books with me? And it's funny as a tagline for the Housewives of Atlanta. I would say this now. Like I'm definitely the type of girl that can't read people because I like to read books. Um, and that certainly has proved to be true because I'm not a reader, but I love to read. So I just went on my Instagram, social media channels and was like, guys, I'm reading this book. There's so much I have to say about it. I want to know, is anyone reading it? And all these people piled on and were like, I'm reading this book, or I'd love to read a book together. And so created this community where week by week, I'd post a reading schedule and I would go through the book with people being like, oh my gosh, do you remember when this? I can't believe this girl did this. And we would have this really engaging two-way dialogue. People would be chiming in on the comments, and we have built a community now of 10,000 people that tune in to read together. Thank you. And, talk about books. And, one of the key features is I always have the author come in for a full spoiler conversation. Not the type when, typically in the book community, in publishing, people have a pub day. It's invariably on a Tuesday and no one's read the book. So you just sort of have this high level conversation. we go full spoilers, like on page 142, why did you make this choice? Or like, I don't like this character. Oh my gosh, I wish she had done something different. And I think that's, a beautiful thing, because reading isn't a solo sport anymore. We want to read it together and talk about it the same way we talk about movies or TV shows. And so it allows like a really deeper sort of engagement to it.
I'm glad you said that because we think about that a lot too. Just the ability to have real in-depth conversations with books. Because I think sometimes we try to treat like as when we watch a movie, you're all about, okay, I didn't like this part, I didn't like this part, I hated that part. With books, there's like a delicacy that people don't want to do that as much with it. I don't know if it's because it's their connection to the author, the writing. Maybe it's harder for them to write. I have no clue. But a lot of times it seems like readers sometimes don't want to have that. But I love with clubs, especially like even what you're talking about, that candidacy that happens
Yes.
in book clubs, that you're going to be like, okay, this book wasn't for me, but here's why, and that, and it allows it better. And I think in an online form when you have those close knit communities that you talk about.
And so like this goes back to the point that you asked me, like, how do you pick your books? I typically am picking books that, like, number one, I understand our community, right? I started engaging. I've been running this book club virtually and online for over 5 years right now, in particular. So I really know our community members. People are always marvel, like, we either go a combination of Instagram Live or we have Zoom parties as well. And I know the names on Instagram. I know their comments. People are sharing things. And I think it's a really special thing when, sometimes social media affords us a little bit of anonymity. So you can say these comments. People are like, I've seen myself in this character, and they're sharing things. And I remember that. So I know our community. And so it allows me to pick really great books. I know what we'll like, what we won't like. I know how we'll be able to stretch, because we don't want to read all the same things. And also understanding like the timing. So for example, during the pandemic, one of our goals was we just needed escapism. It was heavy times, and I was intentionally not choosing books that were really heavy. I love a sad book. I want a book sometimes that's going to eviscerate my heart, but it wasn't right during the pandemic. And so now, as we've come out of the pandemic, we're exploring some heavier themes. We just finished Sky Full of Elephants by Sibo Campbell, heavy book, but the time was right. It coincided with, elections and a lot of conversations that we were having, not just in book club, but in the greater sphere of the world, and, all over. So I think I will say I got a little knack for it, for picking really great books. But, we're pushing ourselves more now. And one of the things about Tanya Time Book Club is I really try to take our community through different walks of life. So predominantly with Tanya Time, and I know the specs and analytics, a lot of the women who follow us are Black women. And so I really try to give us reads that aren't just by, Black women or Black men. We're reading Palestinian stories. We had Eritrean, we have Middle Eastern, we have Asian, so that we can really explore different cultures, because sometimes I feel like that's the best way for us to understand and walk through people's lives. Like it's, feeling like this character in a book is your neighbor, is your friend, is your this, and being like, oh, wow, there's so much similarity, although we come from different parts of the world. So I think those are some of the tenets that I use to help pick my books and explore different types of fiction for us.
Yeah, when you're talking, it kind of brought me back to Toronto, because if you think about Toronto, at least for me, I've noticed it's like very much a multicultural,
Yes.
yeah, like city. So even when you're talking in the books you bring in, because I remember I think you all read like even an Italian book,
Yeah.
recently, and you now you take trips to Ghana and different places. So how do you kind of incorporate that? Like, because I know you started in person, now you're doing online, and then but you also do these trips. So like you kind of talk about
Yeah.
some of the trips you take.
Well, that's such a great question. That's such a great segue there, because, you talked about this. It was the Sicilian inheritance, and it was, Sicily is this tiny little island. But when you actually dived into that book, and it's fiction, but it has this very well-researched historical fiction slant to it. And so you have all these Black women who are reading the story of these Sicilian women, and they're identifying with, just how oppressed they were, how controlled they were by this patriarchy. And we didn't know it. And so it was a really beautiful story for us to share. And the author, Joe Piazza, is amazing. But part of it was, we were reading these books. And as I said, I'm really intentional about trying to support Ghanaian, Nigerian, African authors as well, because oftentimes it's been really hard for me to find great fiction stories. The stories are out there. There's a whole thing that we can get into about what's happening in the publishing industry right now, but I was having to work really hard to find great stories. And so it was intentionally picking Ghanaian authors that were, telling about just their lives. And once we started traveling like that through fiction and books, the community naturally asked for, we want to go there. Let's go there. And so this is where our author dinners started. We started moving from virtual to in person and hosting the authors, having these full spoiler conversations and saying, can we do this in London? Can we do this in Ghana? Can we do this in other places? And then have these incredible authors come on these trips with us. And, the author dinners were typically supposed to be like an hour and a half. I mean, we were 4 and 5 hours having these great conversations. People are crying. The authors are like, this is incredible, because it's honestly great for them too. I really feel like our authors are rock stars, right? In the same way we uphold our musicians, our actresses, like they're the ones who are starting storytelling and giving us these stories from all over the world. So it's so beautiful for them to interact with the community that loves what they've created and supported and do it all over the world. So the travel piece has really grown for us, I will say.
Yeah, so how does that like the travel piece work? Is it you do like 4 or 5 days or experiences within the book club? Let's talk a little bit about.
Yeah, I mean, this has actually been sort of my favorite thing once we can come from behind the screens, as I say. So we have a virtual community, and if you guys are listening to this, I'm just going to do a plug here for at Tanya Time Book Club. Follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on our website, Tanya Time Book Club. But we are open to all. We are definitely the you can sit with us type of book club. You can tune in for our full reads where we read weekly together on Instagram and then have Zoom meetings with the authors, or you can come to some of our travel trips, reading retreats, mini retreats, etc. And so the trips really started where we had these in-person author dinners and people were meeting. They were flying in from all over. The first one we had was with the incredible, well, maybe not the first, but Tia Williams, one of our favorite OG book club authors. And we had about 75 people fly into Atlanta from all over. We had a full dinner, drinks, everything. We started about 7. I think the last person went home from the club at 2 o'clock in the morning because nobody wanted to go home. And they were like, where is the after party? So this whole thing about being booky, geeky, Revenge of the Nerds, like we are outside. But what the community really asked for was more of this. They wanted more interaction. And what I'm really realizing in particular about our group is, we have disposable income. We love to travel. We're buying books. And one of the things is we're really looking to seek conversations that are maybe outside what we've known, right? Your friends, your family, and you're like, who's reading this book? And now you've got these deeper connections. So we decided to do, the first trip was to London. It was 5 different days, and we went through some of the London's best bookstores, literary retreats. We went to Windsor Castle, but every night, one of the key things was we had one of our authors whose book we had read have an author dinner. We had Peace Adomezi, we had Marie Claire Emois, we had Kimberly Bell, and we had deep conversations with them, wrapped around this beautiful experience of being able to travel the world together. I'm going to shout out this drink by Tunde. She wrote an incredible book called Speak. She sent me this energy drink. If you guys don't know her, she's an incredible Peloton author. She's also an OG to our book club. But so I'll talk a bit more about our Ghana trip. So Tanya Time Book Club went to Ghana. If you are looking to find a great trip to travel with, follow us on Instagram. And we basically posted, we're going to Ghana. Do you want to come? And what was so beautiful about it is like I said, most people, I'd say about 90% of the people did not know each other. They were solo travelers. I had all these people DMing me being like, I'm so petrified to go on this trip. I haven't traveled, with a group of strangers. Are people going to be kooky, crazy? What's going to happen? And when I tell you, every single one of those women, we have group chats now that are outside of book club. We'll be friends for life. The experience was so transformative because I was also very intentional about how I could tour and take this group around Ghana to really experience like African and Ghanaian culture and heritage. We did naming ceremonies. We did traditional pouring of libations. We did batik making. And so it was just such a beautiful experience, all wrapped in like this literary experience where we got to meet African authors, very local authors, some that were much more renowned. And just, it was such a beautiful experience. We had another author that flew in from Nigeria. And these are folks that, you know, were either early stage famous, becoming famous, but also famous too because of our book club community, right? Book talk has been such a big thing. So our Nigerian author, Damilar Kuku, I was introduced to her book from book talkers, not because of the publishers here in the US that decided they were going to push this book. And we just love to support authors like this and have a great time.
Yeah, and then last part on that. So that's the bigger picture and how you've built it. For someone that just wants to start a book club, like what would you be advice to so that they can grow to something that you like to the size that you've built?
You know, I mean, this is what I love about apps like Bookem or just the ability to just get something started. Just do it. Like it's almost like the biblical quote, where two shall gather, there is a book club. Like that's all it needs. And then people just really use word of mouth to spread the word. Social media apps, book them. If you were starting a book, you can post on your own TikTok or Twitter, hashtag, hey, I'm reading this. Who wants to read it together? It's really that easy. And it doesn't require, you know, a huge buy-in. People are worried about, do I have to have a website? Do I have to have this? No, you just got to have a couple people that would like to read together. You can start a WhatsApp chat. There's so many ways to organically start a book club community. And just know that you're going to meet so many great people. And it usually starts with a great book.
I think that's a good segue into the publishing company because now you now have all this information about books and what people like and how you consume and create. And so talk to us a little bit about Elizabeth and Minnie, your partnership, and what
Yes.
inspired you to start this company.
So excited to talk about Elizabeth and Minnie. I feel like, you know, it is one of these natural evolutions. So when I started the Tanya Time Book Club, you know, I had this really big community. And one of the things that became very stark to me was not just the community and how much they consumed the books that we loved and that I was putting out to it, but how many people were direct messaging me, reaching out, being like, I'm an author. I have written this great book. I can't get an agent. I can't get anybody to look at my book. Can you help me? Can you help me market it? Can you help me promote it to your audience? And this just didn't happen once or twice. This was like every day I was getting manuscripts or people to help me and people asking for my help. And granted, I know a lot of that comes from, you know, having an Instagram following that's directly related to a show, et cetera, having some sort of notoriety, of course. But what I really started to look into was how broken the publishing industry was. How much of a legacy industry publishing was. And what I mean by that is, you know, in the publishing world, there's probably 5 predominant houses. Everybody knows their names. They are hundreds of years old. And just to be honest, typically they are run by white family men that have owned them for years, right? So we've seen this in tons of different industries, but it still remains in publishing. There's 5 sort of monarchies that control all the books. And so for a lot of the people that were reaching out to me, they were saying, listen, you know, I was looking at who they were. I was going across the ethnicities, and they're predominantly Black people who had a lot of them had great stories. Now, some were not good, but I understood why this industry was so broken. And if you take 3 steps back and understand how you publish a book, right now, oftentimes you have to go on Twitter, search hashtag manuscript wish list, find an agent that may or may not be accepting submissions, send it off blindly into the ethos and hope someone writes you back. Now, if you're famous, like Beyonce, and you have 4 different agents and you've got United Talent Agency and all these people, and they're begging you to write a book, it's a very different story. Or if, for example, you have 500,000 people on Instagram and you're not that famous, but you're sort of famous, people will pay attention. And so I wanted to be able to help some of these early stage authors get their stories out, because I would be reading them and I'd be like, this is actually really good. Nobody wants to publish this. Um, and then conversely, I was also talking to some of my other authors, for example, Peace Adomezi, who wrote one of my favorite books, His Only Wife, and it's set in like a rural village in Ghana, but in modern day times. But she's talking about things and in a way that are very Ghanaian. You know, she would mention the food. She would mention fufu, which I grew up eating. And she would talk about, you know, with her editors who were predominantly white, because that's what the publishing industry looks like right now. And they'd be like, well, you know, I don't understand what fufu is. Could you give me more information about how to eat fufu? And it's weird if you say, you know, she rolled it up, which is a very a very inherently cultural thing. And you know, this author would push back and she'd be like, "Well, I grew up in Ghana. I didn't have hot dogs, to be honest with you, but I understood when I was reading a book about what a hot dog was, you didn't have to explain it." And she'd be like, "Well, that's not going to fly in America." And having to stand on business when you're like, I'm not going to spell out what fufu is. My readers are smart and I'm not going to underestimate my community. So I'm just saying we're eating fufu and figure it out. And so those are sort of the nuances of all these things that were swirling around. And I wanted to be able to do more. And so I started wanting an imprint of my own. So what I thought I wanted was one of the big fives to give me an imprint so I could steward more stories to the big five. And then I realized that wasn't what I wanted either. And in order to sort of do more for the system, do more for the people I wanted to serve, I really realized that I needed to have my own sort of autonomy and I couldn't be constrained by the system that was pre-existing. And how did I do something to really break the mold? And I was introduced to my business partner, Janelle English. She had a long history at the Academy Awards, the Oscars as well, working in DEI. She was, really integral in the entertainment world. And so we met and we had this incredible conversation. And it was like sort of a light bulb went off. And we were like, we need to do a publishing company of our own. So we are two Black women. You know, we founded Elizabeth and Minnie. It is named after both of my grandmother and her great grandmother, who were both in publishing and writers. So we're bringing in all that legacy and ancestry. And our goal and our mission at Elizabeth and Minnie is to really uplift and elevate voices of color, predominantly women from all backgrounds. So Black, Latino, Middle Eastern, Asian American, LGBTQ, and tell and amplify those stories. And also help those authors navigate and take those stories to screen simultaneously as we publish their books.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how do you think about this, right? So, because I think on one hand, what's made obviously these big publishers really big is their access to either celebrity or also these backlists. Like backlists is huge, right?
Yep.
So my question kind of is, do you, and when you're thinking about your imprint, are you thinking more in the terms of, hey, we need a smash hit out front, or is like, hey, we need to build up a strong backlist or multitude of stories to kind of push forward?
So we look at ourselves as a boutique publishing house. In 2025, we'll do 7 to 10 titles. Probably in 2026, we'll do 7 to 10. Of course, we want smash hits. We want the golden ticket. Absolutely. The beautiful thing about this is we have a very steady stream of submissions that are coming in. And we've got some great titles that you will see coming out in 2025. I think people are going to love them. And one thing about this is we're very intentional about how we've sort of curated our community to cultivate and consume the content. So I feel like that alignment there will give us sort of a lift that will take us sort of to the next level as well, for sure. And then I think the other piece to this is, I think oftentimes when people are building businesses, I've worked with founders for, over 10 years, you have to have a little bit of realism. Building any sort of business, it is not easy. I have been fortunate that I've helped many people. I've ran accelerator programs, whether it's in technology, startups, and any startup that you built is very difficult. And so I think that has afforded me the ability to just know that every day you have to get up, you have to set milestones and KPIs and just keep making progress. Don't get discouraged when things don't go as fast as you think they would, or as how other people think they would. You just have to keep making progress and stay aligned to your mission and your goals. And the base hits will end up as home runs.
Yeah, that's well said. And classic question, but say I'm as an author, how do I come to your publishing company and kind of the steps there?
Yes. Okay. So Elizabeth and Minnie, you can go to our website or you can go to our Instagram, which will lead you to our website. And on there, you'll see tabs for like what we do, our mission statements, who we are, so that you can learn a little bit more about us. And in particular, our submission forms. So there is a submission link on there. We are accepting submissions for fiction stories by, voices of color, women of color, white women as well. Like, we want to hear your stories. And you can submit it there. The terms and conditions are there. We will basically review them, and then we will get back to you to say whether or not it's a fit for us, whether we're interested. Like I said, we are a boutique, so our 2025 slate is filling up very, very quickly. And then I think one of the things that's very special about us, like, we are building family. So as we look to decide like how we pick our authors, how we pick our books, it's really about also what our community will love, what we know will sell with our community, and what we know we will sell. So we don't want all of the same. Absolutely not. We want to be able to give our community tons of great reads that allows them to explore different cultures. So right now we are exploring an Iranian author. She's a female. She's written this incredible story. We have a Black male author that tells his story, it's very, very literary, powerful story through his life in Detroit, growing up through the crack epidemic. Some really great stories. We have a fantasy Latina author that will blow your mind. She's a very, very young author, but she has written this prolific story about Mayan ruins. So we are seeing a gamut of submissions. So excited to hear if you guys are working on anything. We want to read it. We want to see it. We want to hear from you. And then I will say this about the authors. We also are really intentional about picking authors who understand how to market books. And I think this is really interesting because once upon a time, a lot of authors were like, well, I can't get my foot in the door in publishing because I don't have a huge following. And we understand that. And we know that you don't need, you might have 1,000 followers, but you might be a great artist. But partnering together, we will help make you a rock star. We've got great marketing tools and tips and tricks. We've got, teams that we sort of put behind each book to do special marketing platforms and programs, because we want you to be successful. We want you to grow a fan base that cannot wait for your next book, that loves you. I will say there's a certain author that I really love. Her name is V.E. Schwab. She writes incredible fantasy. She's one of my favorite authors. And when I tell you the fans of this woman, people have tattooed her characters, her face. Like, that is the goal. When people love our authors so much that they're sending in, oh my gosh, I got a fictional character tattooed on my arm. That's amazing. That's truly amazing.
No, that's absolutely right. And to that point, you talk about the boutique publishing and market. I wanted to get into marketing because I think there are also a lot of books don't always get the long push. And I feel like there's, especially with big publishers, there are so many books coming out every Tuesday. They might have like 50 to 200 books come out.
Definitely have 50 books every Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm interested in how you think about marketing in the terms of, you may have 7 books you put out. Like, what's the thought process there when it comes to marketing?
So it's interesting, Kyle, because you talked about my background being, very, very diverse, but I've worked in startups and technology and helped early stage founders. So sometimes I used to call myself like the startup Mary Poppins. You come in, she comes in with her carpet bag. She's got all these tricks. She does her magic, and then poof, she's on to the next one. But every, book we treat as a startup. It's very different. It's not the same. There's not a formula to it. And so that's why we say between us and our founders, it is a partnership. It is a family. And we have longevity that we're allowed to put behind it. And we put different pairings, different different ideologies behind how we market these books. And that's why we say, we're a small boutique. We want to be able to keep our authors happy in a long-term longevity situation. So a book comes out, we publicized you, we'll keep going. And it's not just like, hey, you went on a 1-2 person press tour, you went to 1 or 2 bookstores, and then that's it, right? We've got 5 other authors, 20 other authors, 56 other authors to push. And so that's one of the things that we're really intent on. And we also need that sort of commitment from the authors as well. And so, we don't want to burn out our authors, but we want them to commit to saying, hey, you've got book clubs that want to see you. You might need to do virtual lives. Like, I think that's really key to how we can have sustainable marketing and longevity and connection between the consumers as well and the authors.
Yeah, when you're saying that, remind me of like a David Ogilvy quote. He said, "You're not marketing to a standing army. You're not marketing to a standing army. You're marketing to a moving parade." And when you
Yes,
think about that, like I think there's so many times there's been books that have been put out, and they might have a really good push at the beginning, and then you just like, since you didn't, you could literally keep promoting it over and over
yeah,
again. Every time you go on social media, there's gonna be people that have never seen your content. But I think a lot of times it's just probably because there's just so many books they have to promote that they don't get a chance to do it. So then, to your point, where the author also has to be someone that really is
absolutely.
cognitive about marketing, how to
Absolutely.
push themselves as artists.
So I'll tell you, I had a submission the other day, or just like some authors, like, for example, when you talk about picking great books. Now, there was this book I loved, Will Remain Nameless. I mean, I loved this book. I read it twice. I read the Audible. I was like, this is the book. This is the book. And we didn't publish this book. This was previously published.
Yeah.
And I went after the author, and I will say blue check, people will respond to my messages. That's how I usually get most of my authors. But she doesn't do any book conversation. She just was like, I don't like people. I don't like crowds. I cannot do it. And I respect it because there are authors. She was like, it gives me the heebie jeebies. This is why I write. This is why this. And now that for me would not be an author that we could pick, right? Because we need you to be out there. Our book clubbers, like when I tell you they show up, they're like, oh, they fly across the country to see this author or this author. They want to know things. They want to ask you questions. That would not be a book that with our small publishing house, we could market. And that's just the way it goes. So yeah, I think it really does come down to authors as well that want to put themselves out there, that have the capacity to, and just some people can't. And I respect that.
Yeah. Do you think there's a similarity between like the skill? Because you talk about hosting a book club. Is there a skill between picking a good book club pick, and then also does that apply to like picking a great author and finding them for the publishing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like I've had the ability now to, really understand our audience. And part of that book selection resonating with like our book club's members has helped me understand how I can be a better publisher, because I have this ability that's been honed over, several years, that allows me to identify authors or manuscripts that I really feel are going to connect with our target audiences. But also gives me some sort of insight, as I study market trends, publisher trends, that it helps me sort of understand the appetite for what's coming up, what's fresh, what's new, because the books that we are reading, 6 years ago are not necessarily what's hot. So you've got to be a little bit cutting edge and understanding. It's kind of like fashion, to be honest with you. I know we think like books are timeless, and they are, but there's different waves of stuff that sort of hit harder at different times.
Yeah, another question for authors when it comes to like working with you all, is it because I know sometimes it's like an advance, or how do you all think about that when it comes to the author and what kind of their deals look like?
So it depends. I feel like, with the larger publishing companies, you've got a range. You will have people who are very famous who are getting these massive advances. And I look at this also from the perspective of what's happening for Black people and in DEI right now, where once upon a time when it was, during the pandemic, I had tons of friends who were getting huge advances, especially if you were a woman of color, person of color, from all different backgrounds, because they really wanted to fund it. They wanted to stand up and do it. What I'm seeing now is a lot of that is going away. So these big advances are just not really sustainable. and they're just not giving the advances, and they're just saying, I don't think our audience is going to be interested in that type of story. The second part with the big advance problem is oftentimes they would give these authors, especially authors of color, big advances, and they were unable to earn out their advances. And if you are listening to this and you're not sure what that means, and an advance is basically like, we're going to write a book together. I'm a big, even me, we give advances to our authors as well. But let's say, I'll give an example of someone I know. I won't say their name, but they're fairly well known. They're going to write this book. Okay, you've got a little bit of an audience. We're going to give you, $100,000 advance, right? $150,000 advance. You have to sell those books to your consumers, your community, in order to like pay off your advance. So it's not free money. You've basically given this advance, and you got to get out there and slang books like, hand-to-hand combat, like selling CDs out of the back of a trunk. And if you don't sell your advance, like there's a whole story behind that. So I think people are being a little bit more educated as authors about understanding what it means to get an advance, what it means to fulfill the requirements of that advance, and being more realistic with how they can make sure that they're able to deliver that. And a lot of that comes down to if you have a team behind you that's willing to properly market it.
Yeah.
Like you've got to have people that are like, hey, we're going to support this marketing. You can't get a big advance and say, hey, we're going to send you on one book tour at Barnes and Noble and then expect you to sell like 100,000 copies of that book.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. And to that also, just being tech savvy, like, how do you think about just like AI and kind of how that's starting to emerge into the book space? I know that AI writers, obviously, we don't want, but like just in general, there's a lot to it. So I'm just curious how you think, especially like.
I love the conversation about AI, but I do want to touch on one thing specifically
Okay.
about publishing advances at Elizabeth and Minnie. So we are, a smaller boutique house. So we probably we give comparable advances, but we also give higher royalties.
Okay.
And that's something that's really important to us. And as part of our business model, we factor in helping you actually option and sell your book simultaneously. One of the things that Janelle, my business partner, has pointed out to me, with her long history at the Academy Awards, she went back and she looked at, over 100 books that were optioned to go to screen. Okay. Yeah. So you write a book and everyone's like, oh my God, this book is great. All the networks come and they're like, we want this book. We want to produce this. We want to make this into a movie. We want to make this on Netflix. But what's really interesting and what we're seeing happen is these books are getting swept up and they're sort of optioned. They are given a paper deal and then you never hear from them again. And so for us, that's made us pause, right? And out of all those options, basically 3% got made and none of them were from people of color. And so that's one of the things that we want to be able to work very hard with. If we are optioning your book, we are taking you to screen simultaneously. It's not 6 years later. It's around the buzz of when your book comes out so that we can harness that energy and we can properly get your baby in the right hands of the production companies, et cetera. So we have a lot of deals with first look production companies where they're like, hey, what do you got? What are you producing? What are the great stories that we can produce? And I think that's really important to us. So that's a very well-rounded approach where we feel like we give comparable advances, but we have higher royalties. And then we also help you to find the production partners so that your book can go to screen as well.
Yeah, and to that point, I just think that it does make a lot of sense because especially just being in the book space, as you know, like the community is so tight. Like like you're saying, if a book comes out, say it's, for lack of a better term, it's called Funny Story by Emily Henry. There's already a huge community that wants to see that book. They want to read the book. They want to see the characters. They want to see all that. So I think there is that nice pipeline that I don't think, I've obviously you all see it, but I don't think enough people see that there's like, you can really go from book to something else in a very seamless way as you kind of help build up the IP too, as you're saying, as you do the marketing and everything.
And that is, I love that we've even introduced this conversation of like, this is IP, this is intellectual property. And especially for, us at Elizabeth and Minnie, we are very intent on having our communities understand like this is our goal. And as we talk about building wealth and generational wealth and controlling our narratives and actually being able to tell our stories, we need to understand that this IP is so important that we hold, that we own, and that we have trusted people working to support that.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's talk about AI and technology.
Yeah, I did want to talk about that because I think, like I said, as I mentioned, you don't want AI writers, like just like, because that doesn't seem like something that maybe, I don't know, maybe I have no clue what.
I mean, this is a great conversation, and I have
really
it a
don't
lot,
know.
Kyle, because
Yeah.
I think it's really fascinating. And you know, I've worked in technology. I've been in tech for, you know, over 10 years. I've learned so much in that. And I've watched AI sort of be ushered in. I'm sure if anyone out here has used ChatGPT, they do use it or they don't use it. It's an incredible tool.
Yeah.
AI as itself is an incredible, incredible tool. And, you know, if I was, you know, consulting with my founders or whatever, I would tell you whatever business you are building right now, you have to build it with also the mindset of what that business looks in 5 years. So as I sit here and I'm building this publishing company and books are in this legacy industry, I'm like, what will this look like in 5 years? And as much as I hold our creatives and our creative content creators, you know, at a very special place, I realize that AI is coming and it's coming for this industry as well. So I agree with you. I don't think that we are at the place, and it doesn't, in our company, we don't want to use AI to write books and stories. We do not. But I think there's places for it. Like I'd be lying if I didn't say I use AI to write an Instagram caption for me. And so there's things that we're exploring. Maybe, you know, for example, as we get inundated with submissions, is there a way that we have maybe AI that can also comb through those submissions? It actually helps because if you understand how AI works, it's like scraping native language, narrative language. And I'm very particular about having it be more and more accurate. So for voices of color, et cetera, we have more of that in the banks of AI. So there's sort of tools that we do use. Now, I get really angry when I hear about other tools. Like, for example, NPR just did this article about Amazon. And so Amazon is using AI, for example, and don't quote me on this, but, you know, it's taking their top books, throwing it into AI and saying, hey, this book is selling really well. Please make me an AI version. They might have human input into it, and then creating an Amazon Kindle book or something. It's 99 cents. If you liked this, buy this.
Crazy. Yeah.
That is an example of AI that I'm not down for. And I hope Amazon is not your sponsor. I'm not saying it's bad. People like those books, but I'm saying that is probably not how we want to see AI used in literary works in with creatives. But I think there's lots of different ways that it's going to help the publishing industry for sure. If we can streamline how we can get more manuscripts, how we can maybe edit faster, and the more we use the tool, the better it will become. So I'm sort of on the fence on whether it's great or good or whatever, but I will say I think more will be revealed.
Yeah, I always say like AI is a good sparring partner, but it's not necessarily a great master. And I think something like what you're saying, that just becomes a master. Like, hey, this book just got produced, right?
Yes.
Where I do think there's a world where author may be like, okay, I have this idea, I'm trying to figure out this. You might help, it might spar with you in a way where now you're actually writing it, but at least it might be prompting you as somebody who wants to be more creative or think in ways that you weren't thinking.
And I also implore people to like, you know, don't knock it till you've tried it. I'm not saying it's going to be, if you're a writer and you're having writer's block, you should pop it into AI or whatever. But I'm saying if you are just listening to this podcast and you want to start a book club and you're like, oh no, there's so many different things. Hey, you know, start your book and book club, but then use AI to help you create some posts or some collateral, or like it is the easy button that you need to make your life a little bit easier.
Yeah, as we start to kind of wrap up, I kind of want to get into a little bit of your taste in books. So can you tell us like what you've read last, what you're reading now, and what you are looking at next?
Okay, so this question always makes me laugh because it's like, be careful what you wish for if you're a powerful manifester, because like I always wished for this life where when I was growing up, I thought I wanted to own a bookstore. I was going to call it the Bookmark, and I was just going to read books for the rest of my life. Well, guess what? I am reading books for the rest of my life, and I feel like I am constantly reading 5 or 6 different books. I have so many to read. So be careful what you wish for. So I probably read And I used to be the type of one book girl. I'm probably reading no less than 10 books at different points. I'm constantly getting manuscripts and subscriptions. I just finished Sky Full of Elephants. I'm reading this book right now called The Persians. It doesn't come out till March. It is amazing, amazing, but it's set in Tehran and it's a great family saga, but also very contemporary. It sort of follows from like the 60s right through to present day. Love it, love it. I just got this other book called Harlem Rhapsody, historical fiction. It is by Victoria Christopher Murray. It is so, so good. And then I just reread The Alchemist by it's,
Oh yeah,
you know,
Paulo
famous
Coelho.
book.
Yeah.
I picked it up the other day and I just sort of blasted through it. And then I'm just reading all your submissions that you send in to Elizabeth and Minnie folks. Like they come in hot and I love it. It keeps me up at night and makes me smile. Very happy about that.
Yeah, like what makes a good page turner for you, or like what kind of books that not even is on publishing, but just in general as a reader?
Characters. I love a great character arc. You either have to make me love you so much or loathe you so much. That helps me to not put things down. I love a good fantasy book. So if you are really what I would call a masterful weaver, where you're creating worlds or stories that really take me someplace else, I am so grateful to you for that because I feel like it is such an incredible talent and subset to be able to create worlds.
Oh yeah.
Um, I like a little bit sad books sometimes. Like I want to feel that you're really evoking feeling from me and just a very good developmental plot. You know, I'm also a wordsmith and a prose lover. So if you can give me beautiful writing where I just need to pull out a pen and underline things, close the book and like think about how that sits with my soul, that gets me every time.
Okay, so you're a big you mark up your books. You're
I mark up my books. I certainly mark up my books. I love doing that. I go back and forth. You know, I will say people always ask me, how do you read so much? I love an Audible.
oh yeah.
Um, I love an Audible. I love a hard copy book and I love, a Kindle book because I'm on the go so much. You just got 10 minutes. You want to open up a book and be reading on your phone. People think you're on Instagram or something. And I'm like, don't talk to me. I'm reading my book.
There you go. Let's get into a quick rapid fire. So, if you can invite any three authors, past or present, to your book club meeting, what would you? Who would they be, and what would you like to discuss with them?
Octavia Butler, absolutely. I just would be like, take me through your worlds. I really, really loved her. I think I would take who else would I take next? Um uh Alice Walker, because she is just class. Do I only have three?
Well, you can go 4 or 5.
Okay, fine. I'm just
Why
gonna tell you,
not?
Nikki Giovanni, because she just passed, and my heart broke
Yeah.
open, and I just feel like she was so inspirational. Like she really introduced me to poetry and prose, but also like um, she was very fantastical, but like rooted in STEM and science and like the universe, which I really loved about her. I would also pick, let me see. Mm, who else would I pick? Someone who's alive. I mean, the beautiful thing is like a lot of these authors become my friends. So I'm really trying to go for dead poets here, dead poets, dead people, because like there's like 1 degree of separation right now. So who's dead that I could add to my table? Um, I think I would pick Oprah too. She's not dead, but she's an author, she's a writer, she's been incredible for the book club, for books and community. She really was one of the early people that made like book clubs and reading really fun, and I admire her so much for that, and I just want to be like, can we sit around, drink tea and talk about books? What are you
Yeah,
reading? What are you reading, girl?
that's a good choice. What's the best discussion of the year you've had in your book club?
Oh, I'm going to give you rapid fire. I would say Sky Full of Elephants because that was really instrumental. I mean, Sky Full of Elephants is a book where, on the first page, he starts off and he says all the white people in North America died in a tragic event. And we took this was the first time we sort of took Tanya Time Book Club. And then also we're the official book club for Soho. So we had increased our community and it was a very, very diverse community. So we had lots of, the we had white people, Black people reading the story. And I think that was really, really thought-provoking for many, many people. I would also say we did, in the very early days, we did a white author called Gary Janetti. He's a gay man, and we read his memoir. And it was really interesting because a lot of the women were like, why are we reading this book? But he is so funny. And we read this book, and it was the first time we really realized like all these synergies. We had all these Black women being like, oh my God, this gay white man, like your memoir resonates with me. I cannot believe this.
Yeah. All right. And then, so what is a book from your book club that you're like, hey, everyone should probably read this one? This is one you have to read.
We Are Not Like Them. It is a book that is written by it was co-authored by a Black woman, Christine Pride, and a white woman, Joe Piazza. And it tells the story of a 12-year-old Black boy who was shot, but it tells it through the lens of a Black woman and a white woman who grow up as best friends. And I think it is a great book club pick. If anyone wants to have a great conversation with their book clubs, I think it was really, really good. And it got a lot of press, and, you know, it allows us to talk about conversations that are really tough in mixed audiences.
Perfect. And last one on the rapid fire, favorite audiobook you've listened to this year?
Oh, I would say Night Bloom by Peace Adomezi, because it was I really liked it because, number one, the narrator was a true Ghanaian. And so the accents, you really felt like you were exploring Ghanaian culture, and it was very, very authentic. It was very important to me because her first book did not have a Ghanaian narrator. And so this author had more autonomy to choose who her narrator was. And I feel like that was a big milestone for her and for me to experience.
Perfect. We'll make sure to add all those into the book, into the description, as well as your book club. The way we like to end this podcast, we like to talk to the founder. So if you could choose one legacy to leave behind, whether it's in publishing, entrepreneurship, community building, what would you want it to be?
Oh, a legacy to leave behind. Um, I would want people to understand, founders, book clubbers, that whatever you dream, you can do. Honestly, like if your dreams aren't big enough, keep dreaming and keep working towards them. You got this. You really, really do. That's the legacy that I think all of us have to leave. Like, this world, this life is short, so just go for it.
I love it. And the other two questions we end is, what should be in a founder's toolkit?
An accountant, a bookkeeper, a lawyer, and somebody who is the operations person. If you are a founder and you were the visionary person, you need to find yourself a partner that can get into the nitty-gritty alongside you and make sure you've got all those bases covered, because oftentimes founders are really about the vision and the excitement, but you need to have the trifecta of knowing that you need a piece of all of those bases covered from the very beginning.
Very true. Definitely listen back to that part. And the last one, I'll change it up a little bit for you, but what do you think should be in a good book club's toolkit?
Ooh, social media. I think finding a great way to connect with your community, whether it's through chat forums, or in-person events. And I think, you know, just being able to have conversation. Like, I think that's the biggest thing. And then apart from that, um, yeah, just create some content.
There
Just
you
go
go.
for it.
There you go. Thank you so much, Tanya, for your time. Please let us know what's coming up in your world, anything we can support, or just where to find you on the internet.
Amazing, Kyle. This was such a pleasure. I love what you're doing with Bookem. It is like a joy to be here right now. So everybody, if you are not on Bookem, get on there. You can find us on Instagram at Tanya Time Book Club. You can follow me personally on Instagram at its, as an ITS, Tanya Time. And if you are an aspiring author, we would love to hear from you. You can find us at elizabethandminnie.com. We're also on Instagram. There's multiple ways to submit. We would love to have your submissions and hear more from you. And just happy reading. Find yourself a book club community where you feel you can fit in and you can always sit at the table with us.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Have a great one.
Thank you.